Diejenigen, die untertätig am Spielfeld dran sitzen und nicht unternehmen, während Grenada geopfert wird, tragen ebenfalls Verantwortung. Those who sit on the sidelines while Grenada is sacrificed at the altar also bear responsibility. I will explain. Now, during the initial stages of the spat between the US and Venezuela, and Grenada offering up itself to be some sort of interlocutor, and all the radical leftist speeches that were propagated by the administration and their close radical leftist affiliates, the other parties had an opportunity to prove to themselves and to prove to Grenadians that they had the ability to manage the affairs of Grenada if they were given the opportunity. That at least, at minimum, that they had foresight and understood the geopolitical situation, and that the response of the current administration was an entirely wrong approach. Especially the opposition. The opposition who wants to take the job of the current administration had an obligation in such a moment to prove to Grenadians that they were up to the task, that they had the foresight, that they had the political understanding, especially in the arena of geopolitics, that they should have signaled to the Grenadian people that the path that the current administration is taking and the approach that they are using to deal with the situation between US and Venezuela was the wrong approach. But instead, they did nothing and said nothing. They are parliamentary representatives, and they're in the middle of a grave crisis or realizing the potential hazards that was in for Grenada, should have brought this up in the parliament, should have found some way to challenge the government and to alert the Grenadian people about what was going on. But instead, they said nothing. As if they were all afraid of the radical leftist voices that were tooting their horn. While the radical leftist voices was all over the place, all over Grenada, speaking in a big, deep voice and loudest voices, trying to influence public opinion, the opposition said nothing. The opposition said nothing. And I can understand it might have been a passive-aggressive strategy to say, oh, well, let the current administration make mistakes. We're going to score political points. But the problem with that approach, that the situation was so grave, the stakes for Grenada were so high, that you should not have stood on the sideline while the radical leftists took the podium to try to influence the people of Grenada. Even secretly, you could have tried to counteract what they were doing. You could have secretly organized campaigns and anti-protests to the protests that they were having. But instead, you sat there and allowed Grenada to be sacrificed at the altar. And today, look at the consequences that Grenadians are facing. So in some respects, you have to understand that you bear responsibility. And while, of course, the major responsibility is borne by the people who are in the driver's seat, you are part of that vehicle. You are in the back seat, and you can shout and tell the drivers, look, you're going the wrong way. And in the opposition, there are seasoned, veteran politicians who should have understood what was taking place. These young cats don't know what's going on. These young cats are giddy-headed. They are drunken. They are busy dipping their hand in the cookie jar. But you, the opposition, had an obligation to alert, to enlighten, to educate the Grenadian people as to what was taking place. And you failed at that task. And then you're telling the Grenadian people that you are up to the task to take on the new mantle of responsibility and rescue Grenada. Do you think the Grenadian people would be convinced? For all these young cats who say they are vibrant and full of energy within the NNP, they should have used this as a pet project. They should have used this as an opportunity to show Grenadians that they are up to the task, that they understand themselves, geopolitics and the implications thereof. But they said nothing. Where was the young Dialis? Where was the young Japals? Where were all the young upstart politicians within the NNP? That was an opportunity for them that they should have seized. And where were the seasoned veterans in the party guiding them on this issue and pushing them to go to the forefront and speak about that issue? You have to understand, in some respects, there was dereliction in your duty. So when I talk about, and when I say that seasoned people on the ground tell me that the political atmosphere in Grenada is one where there are two weak parties, they may not be exaggerating. That seasoned person said to me that this is the worst they have seen in politics in Grenada. And don't think you other parties are off the hook. Don't think you get a pass or you get a break. Because if you also understood geopolitics, you would have taken it up upon you to challenge the current administration and say to them, look, you are going down the wrong path. That your strategic approach to the US-Venezuela situation is detrimental. Where was the GULP? And the GULP's party understood the implications and how detrimental radical leftist intervention in anything can be, because they themselves were the victim of radical leftist regime in 1979. So they have history. So they were actually positioned to come and warn and alert the Grenadian people that, look, the NDC is hijacked by radical leftists and the strategic approach to the situation between the US and Venezuela is detrimental to Grenada and can have lasting consequences. But the GULP said nothing on the issue. And today, even when the NDC administration refused to come and speak to the people, the GULP said nothing. The GULP didn't demand, they didn't get into the public domain and demand that the NDC come to the Grenadian people and speak to the Grenadian people and explain why they made such a grave political blunder. On top of this, you have to understand who is the leader of the GULP. Mr. Jeffrey Prudhomme. The gentleman is well placed to understand matters of geopolitics. The gentleman had an extensive career of over 30 years in the United States Air Force. Traveled extensively throughout the world. But yet still, this gentleman said nothing. On top of that, the gentleman himself and his family was victimized after the overthrow of the Gary government in 1979. The gentleman himself was temporarily housed at the Richmond Hill prison at the hands of the radical leftists who overthrew the Gary government. So he has had personal experience with the dangers of Grenada flirting with radical leftist socialist Marxists. First-hand experience. So the gentleman had an obligation to warn the Grenadian people that this new NDC's administration's flirtation again with socialist Marxists can only lead to danger. Because as I have told you guys, everything that these socialist Marxist radical leftists touch turns to stone. They are like Medusa, the great mythological figure. If they watch you, you'll turn to stone. They are masters of destroying anything they touch. But they cannot build anything. So I believe the leader of the GULP has an obligation now to come to the Grenadian people that haven't had such wealth of experience in dealing with socialist Marxists and even had to flee the island because of the socialist Marxists. That was the impetus for him leaving Grenada. He had to flee undercover from the island because of the socialist Marxists who took over in 79. So the gentleman has to come to the Grenadian people and explain to us, Mr. Jeffrey Pradhan, why he didn't warn the Grenadian people of the impending doom that was about to descend on the population. Hopefully he accepts our invitation to explain himself. Where was the Pioneer Revolutionary Party? Did they agree at the time to the strategic approach? Were they riding you-know-what, Venezuela's, and agreed with the NDC about the strategic approach on the issue? So it's quite obvious that the Pioneer Revolutionary Party did not even understand the geopolitics and the implications for Grenada. Where was the CAGCP? Or whatever the name of the party is. Where was that party? Why didn't they alert Grenadians that, hey, look, you see what the NDC is doing? This can have detrimental consequences for Grenada. This can have dire consequences for Grenada. So if you're on the sidelines and you want to signal to the Grenadian people that you are a possible alternative for leadership in Grenada, then you have an obligation when you see grave situations like that taking place that you need to come forward and alert the Grenadian people. So it tells me either you guys did not understand the geopolitics, or you were willfully sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, or you were incompetent to do anything. Either way, that does not help Grenada. Either way, that does not tell the Grenadian people that you are up to the task. And even when the NDC refuse to come back to the Grenadian people and explain to the Grenada people what is happening in the midst of the consequences, you guys sat there and you said nothing. When all the radical leftists were the biggest voices on the esplanade all over the place, trying to influence Grenadian people on the issue, where were you? Why didn't you guys organize an anti-protest against them? Or why did you guys have a protest on the issue offering an alternative, but then you guys say you want to rescue Grenada? Now, it's no mystery then that these upstarts and charlatans were able to outsmart you guys in the last election. It is no mystery. It was no mystery that they were able to try to bamboozle the Grenadian people and tell them about bucket trucks going and pick fruits in the evening. It was no mystery that they outwitted you guys on the pension issue. It is no mystery now. You have to also acknowledge that you bore some responsibility in that particular situation that Grenada now finds itself. Because as I have said, the parliament is like a vehicle. The current administration is in the driver's seat, but you are in the back seat. You can shout, you can scream, you can deafen them with alternative approach and advise them, and you have the option of going to the Grenadian people and telling the Grenadian people what's going on so that the Grenadian people can put pressure on them. You cannot be in that vehicle, parliamentary vehicle, see that things are going the wrong way, see that Grenada is about to get into an accident, and not alert the people about what's going on. That, my friends, is dereliction of duty. Again, where was the GOLP? Again, where was the CAGCP? And I understand the response of the leader of the DPM at the time, because we understand why their position would have been their position. We understand that there may be some sort of sentimental sympathies for one reason or the other. And they themselves, in some respect, tried to chart a middle ground in the issue. Tried to talk in generalities about the issue. But they themselves should also realize that ultimately their first and foremost obligation was to the Grenadian people. So the bottom line is this. You had an administration that seemingly loved other leaders and other people of other nations than they loved themselves and Grenada. You had a bunch of other parties who are telling us that they want to be the leaders of Grenada and sat on the sidelines and did nothing. And you had those who charted a middle ground. So you have to understand, it seems in some respect that Grenada is being betrayed left, right, and center. It seems like the interest of Grenada is subservient to everybody else's interest. So how do you redeem yourselves from what you allowed to happen to Grenada? Going forward, what is your plan for redeeming yourselves, for allowing Grenada to be sacrificed at the altar? On your watch. On all of you guys' watch. None of you are absolved of responsibility. Of course, we understand that the people, the current administration, are in the driver's seat. But you, especially the opposition and the other parties who want to offer themselves up in the upcoming election as viable to lead the nation, you too bear responsibility for what took place. Because you allow them big old deep voice in them to come and hijack, okay? Hijack the narrative on the spat between the US and Venezuela. You allowed them to be the loudest voices. And they pretty much prevailed. They triumphed. So you guys lost. In that political battle, you guys lost. Eventually, of course, Grenada lost. But in that initial battle, these people, these radical leftists with a big old deep voice, triumph over you guys. And this is the same big old deep voice one of those radical leftists, when they were in the Union, used to intimidate Grenadian people and the workers of Grenada. This is the same old big old deep voice they use to intimidate companies in Grenada and the government for their own edification, to propel themselves forward. And now in this year time, you let a big old deep voice come and intimidate all you. And you guys cower and allow them to triumph in controlling the narrative on the issue. So much so that they had Grenadians saying the most vitriolic things about the United States. So all you on the sidelines, the opposition and all you parties were presenting itself as some sort of viable alternative to this current administration, you all downright failed and got an F. Now these are the facts. That is the hardcore truth. And if I were you guys, I would have done some introspection so that I can have a proper, solid approach going forward. These are serious times in Grenada, in the Caribbean and the world. And this is not the time for unstrategic, incompetent, miscalculating people without sound judgment. The days of corned beef and cricks and rum and Red Bull politics are over.